So this evening, the Chancellor went live with an update to the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. So this was eagerly awaited. We've been looking forward to this all week. But it has, in all honesty, I think, turned out to be a bit of a damp squib, looking at all the upset and the stress that it's caused in quite a few of the Facebook groups that I'm in. So I've been watching this all evening and watching some of the discussions and what's happened and the reaction against what's been announced. So let's have a look at what's been announced. Now, the government have offered a taxable grant of £2,500 or 80% of the average last 3 years of trading profits. They haven't defined what profits mean, but I think most of us have a reasonably good idea of what trading profits mean for the self-employed. It's a bit questionable whether they include depreciation and things in there, but I guess that will come out in the wash in due course. It is payable for the next 3 months, and the clear definition at the moment is for self-employed, which includes sole traders or partnerships. Now, it relates to tax returns submitted in 2018-19, so you must have had a tax return submitted in 2018-19, and your trading profit for 18 and 19 must have been 50k or lower, or your average trading profits for the last 3 years must be 50k or lower. So if you meet one or either of those criteria, then you are entitled to the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. Now, your trading profits must be 50% of your income or more than 50% of your income. So if your income came from dividends and investments, you probably wouldn't be eligible for this. You must have traded in 2019 to 20, so in this current tax year, even though we're not, they're looking at the tax returns for this year, and you must have lost profits due to COVID-19. So this is a taxable grant and it's treated as income, so it will just be reported in next year's income tax return. It relates to self-employed and partnerships. Now, this is where it does get a bit confusing. He didn't say anything in his announcement about director-owner companies, director-shareholder companies. So there was a lot of people who consider themselves to be self-employed, even though they're directors and shareholders of their own company, who thought they were included. Apparently not. Now, the last 1 or 2 or 3 years are accepted. If they're talking about an average of the last 3 years worth of trading profits, but if you've only traded for 1 or 2 of those years, then they'll take the average of what's available. Now, HMRC will write to you if you're eligible. You will then be invited to apply and fill in an online application form, but they're very clear. Do not call HMRC to ask about this. If you call HMRC to ask about this, they believe that you will slow down the process, the implementation process of this support scheme. Now, the cash, which has caused a little bit of an upset, is not going to be payable until June 2020, although it will be backdated for 3 months. Now, they're saying if it's in place earlier, they will pay the money earlier, but at the moment it's likely that because of other complications with trying to calculate 3 years average income, they'll be taking it from already filed tax returns. So if somebody tries to file a tax return and update one that's already been been supplied, they'll be looking at this very carefully. They've given a 4-week extension for anybody who hasn't yet filed their 2018-19 tax return. You've got another 4 weeks to get it in, or that won't be counted. So it does look like, on the basis of this information, that director shareholders are excluded, which is a bit of an upset for director shareholders. So let's have a little look about some of the detail behind this. Now, during his speech, Mr. Sunak hinted at future changes to the tax system as the government later seeks to right the ship following huge bailouts for businesses and workers due to the coronavirus. Now, he said it was much harder to justify the difference in tax contributions between those who are self-employed and those who are employed. And if we all want to benefit equally from state support, we must all pay in equally in future. So that there is a disparity between the self-employed and those who are employed in payroll, but it's not enormous, you know. But then he didn't say anything in his speech about director shareholders. He completely was silent on them, completely mute on that whole point. But when you look at the application process or the details actually on HMRC Online, it specifically says right at the very bottom that if you're a director of your own company and paid through PAYE, you may be able to get support using the job retention scheme. So let's have a little look at that. Now, if you are a furloughed employee on about £50,000 a year, you would have paid about $4,989 in national insurance contributions in the 18 to 19 tax year, but you would be entitled to 80% of your income up to about £2,500, but you can't work. If you're self-employed and you earn less than £50,000 or just under £50,000, you would have paid, if you earned £50,000, about $3,741 in national insurance contributions. That's about 80% of the amount of national insurance that an employed person pays. But you would get 80% of your average profit for the last 3 years up to the £2,500. So you get a similar level of benefit. But whereas the furloughed employee can't work, you can work if you're self-employed. Now, if you're a self-employed direct person earning £50,001, you are not entitled to any help. So you would have to rely on savings or borrowings or earnings if you want to pay your bills over the next few months. As with the self-employed person earning just under 50k, you would have paid about $3,741 in national insurances. Now, if you compare that to a director shareholder, and this is where the upset has come, if we earn 50,000 as a director shareholder of our own company, and we have a dividend and a maximum dividend and minimum director's payroll, we would have paid no national insurance contributions during the last tax year. If we're furloughed, which is incredibly difficult to do when you are an employee of your own company and you've still got to run it, maintain it, you might need to keep people informed of what you're doing, keep your customers aware of what's happening as you go through this crisis and come out the other end. If you furloughed yourself, you wouldn't be able to do any of that, but you would only get about £580 per month of income under the job retention scheme, which is just not enough for most self-employed or most director shareholder companies. It's not worth the amount of money that you would get to close your company completely. So you would then have to live off savings or borrowings or earnings. So I think over the next couple of days there's going to be a huge uproar because director shareholders have been completely and utterly ignored in this whole process. I'm hoping it's an oversight. I'm hoping it's a huge mistake because directors and shareholders still contribute a huge amount of tax into the community, into the UK, but they haven't contributed any national insurance. And I wonder if that is what's caused this big disparity. Well, I suspect it is, but I wonder if they're actually going to do anything about it. I wonder if they're holding back on director shareholders and they'll announce something for us in the coming days, but then they'll take it back later on by making sure that we pay national insurances alongside the same levels as employees and what self-employed people will probably have to pay in the future. Or they won't. If they don't, and they expect us to bail ourselves out of this challenge, then that's going to be a bit of a shock and a disappointment for a lot of director shareholders. Having said that, director shareholders tend to be quite entrepreneurial and tend to be quite self-servicing. So whatever happens, they often tend to find a way to work out of it and find something that they can do to create that kind of income. Otherwise, they really have only got the welfare system to support them. And I don't think that's going to fly with a lot of self-employed director shareholder people.